In this presentation, we will take a look at the Report Center and look at different ways that we can generate and produce reports within QuickBooks Pro 2020, QuickBooks Desktop 2020. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. We currently have the Open Windows open. You can open the Open Windows by selecting the View dropdown up top and the Open Windows list. We're now going to be taking a look at the Report Center, but before we go into the Report Center, note that as we have seen in a few reports thus far when looking at the balance sheet and the profit and loss, the two reports we will be working with most often, the financial statement type of reports, we have done so with a drop-down type of menu. This will be the format that I would go to with the reports that I am most familiar with, the ones I used most often. This is probably the quickest way to get into a report, which is to select the reports dropdown, for example, and the reports we have been taking a look at is the profit and loss standard and the balance sheet standard. We have other lists of reports that will be grouped in these categories: company and financial, customers, receivables, sales, jobs, vendors, purchases, inventory, employee payroll, and so on. Now, if we get into other types of reports that we are not as familiar with, it can be a little daunting, a little confusing to take a look at these drop-down type of menus, and therefore on those types of reports, those that I don't use as often, those that I don't know how to get into as quickly, or that I don't know exactly what the format is or the format that I desire, I will then go to the Report Center. So the Report Center is what we will look at now. So this is the other option to get into the reports other than the drop-down menu. Reports drop-down and then the Report Center. And then within the Report Center, you'll have, I'm going to maximize the screen here. I'm going to maximize this screen. We'll have down below, we'll have those same categories we saw in the drop-down. Company, we have the customers, receivables, sales, and so on the left-hand side. In the middle, we're actually going to have, of course, the reports. Keep in mind that up top, you're going to have more tabs, however, and you want to make sure you're on the proper tab, the one you want to be in. The one we usually want to be in will be the standard tab. But if you were in, for example, the Memorize tab last time, the next time you open the Report Center, you will be in the Memorize tabs, and you're going to have to remember to go back to the standard tab. The Memorize tab will give us memorized reports. We'll talk more about memorizing reports in future presentations. It can be very useful as we format different types of reports and then want to memorize the formatting of those reports to then have them here to go straight into them and not have to reformat reports every time we go into them. We have the favorite reports. We can put our favorite reports in here. The recent reports, this one will open the most recent reports that we have had in use. And then we have the contributed reports. These are going to be reports that other people have put together that have been useful to them, and they've been put in here to see if they would be useful to you. So they've been modified type of reports that have already been modified, and then if any of these modifications look useful to you, then you can utilize those reports. Going back to the standard tab up top, this is going to be the standard tab that we will typically be using. We're in the company and financial. Then we have the view options to the upper right. The default view will be this kind of grid type of view, the grid view. This is the one I like to see most when I'm kind of just going straight into these reports as opposed to the drop-down menu, because I'm looking for usually a little bit more detail than I'm typically see in the drop-down menu. If I want to see a list of things, I'll see it in the drop-down menu. However, then we have the lists, which is a bit more condensed here, and it's a little bit easier to see than the drop-down menu. So the list view could be a useful view as well. And then you have this view, which I sometimes use when I just want to get a report that I don't know exactly what I want in terms of the format. I want to know what the format of the report looks like. This will give us the clearest kind of example of what the report will look like, and you can just scroll through this report to see which one is the one you are looking for. So I'm going to go back to then the grid view. The grid view is probably the default standard view, probably the view that would be most used. Once we decide which report we want to be looking at, like in this case, the profit and loss report, then we can run the report down below. Note that you can choose options such as the date option up top and the dates here before you run the report. I typically run the report and then, run those options. So I will typically go here and run this report and then choose the date. So this is the same fields we saw there. We have the date in terms of this month to date. These are going to be the date ranges that we can use here. or we can just set a custom date range by tabbing through it, and that's what I'll do here by going to 01/01/20 to 12/31/20, and that's going to be a custom date field. So here's going to be our profit and loss report. That's going to be the most standard type, one of the most standard type of reports. This in the balance sheet are financial statement type reports. Closing this back out. Then we have some other options down below, including a description of the report. How much money did my company make or lose? So they're going to give a description of what the report will give us. We can put it into the favorites with the heart item here. So, and then just to give you a list of the reports, when you look at the company and financial reports, the main reports we want to think about are the profit and loss and the balance sheet type reports. Now, the profit and loss type reports will be up top. Of those, we'll be using the standard profit and loss most often. If you scroll down, then the one you're going to be using next most often is the balance sheet. So you want to go you got to go kind of all the way down here to get to the balance sheet reports. These are the two financial statement reports. The way they have formatted them is to put all the income statement type of reports up top and then the balance sheet. But the balance sheet standard, the income statement standard, those are the ones that are going to be the most common two that you will go into. So don't get kind of confused and think, well, all these reports up top are probably more useful than the balance sheet. No, they probably could have actually made another tab that would break out the income statement and the balance sheet type of reports. If that would be a logical thing to do. But in any case, we're going to go back up top and we have the profit and loss standard. We have the profit and loss detail. And I'll let you go and review these reports with more detail. I'll just go through them quickly here. We've got the profit and loss year-to-date comparison, so a comparison report. And then we have the profit and loss previous year comparison to the previous year. Profit and loss by job. So if we're using a job cost system, we can use this report. That would be used in like construction or other type of job cost systems. We won't get into a lot of detail on the job cost system here in this problem, but we'll touch on jobs. We will create jobs. We may make a course just on a job cost system. Profit and loss by class. Classes are going to be another type of feature that we can use. We're not going to get into a lot of detail on setting up the classes here. They're a little bit more advanced, but we may mention them in the future. Then we have the profit and loss unclassified. Then we've got the income and expenses. Notice these are grouped above the balance sheet because income and expense are basically profit and loss type of items. The profit and loss report has income and expense in it. So income by customer summary, income by customer detail, expenses by vendor summary, expenses by vendor detail, and the income and expense graph. Then we have the balance sheet reports. The main one we will be using is the balance sheet standard. Then we have the balance sheet detail report, the balance sheet summary, the balance sheet previous year comparison, and the net worth graph. Then we have the cash flow reports, which will include the statement of cash flows. This is another kind of core financial statement type of report, and the cash flow forecast. We'll talk more about these reports in detail, or the main reports, or the financial statement reports, in the future. The next tab down is the customers and receivables. Now, these reports are going to be really important if your company is dealing with receivables from customers. In other words, if you sell things, don't get paid at the same point in time, but will get paid sometime in the future, such as a bookkeeping firm, a law firm, or other type of services where we usually do the work and then get paid in the future. We then need to track the money that will be paying us. This could be a full-time job, people that work in accounts receivable. So we have the AR aging summary report, which will age the receivables. We'll talk more about this in the future. AR aging detail. We got the accounts receivable graph. We've got the open invoices. We have the collections report, average days to pay summary, and average days to pay. Then we have the customer balance. We have the customer balance summary report. This is going to support the balance sheet accounts receivable account by who owes us the money. And then we have the customer balance detail, giving us the detail of why they owe us the money. And then we have the unbilled costs by job, transaction list by customer. Then we have a lists, which includes the customer list, giving us basically the phone number and the customer name, address, and that kind of thing. Customer contact list and the item price list. Item price list, these are going to be things that are items, including inventory items and service items, the things we sell, the services that we provide. Then we're going to go to the sales tab up top. So if we go to the sales tab, we got the sales by customer. Now note that the sales, you'll note, was something that was involved in the profit and loss. When you think of sales, it's a revenue, basically, type of accounts. But now we're going to be breaking out in more detail, focusing in specifically on sales. In other words, if we think about the revenue account, then we can break out the revenue account by customer, basically, rather than having the revenue account just as a total. So the revenue account is going to be the main account. We can then think about the customers that gave us that revenue. The sales by customer detail, so the sales or revenue by customer detail, sales by ship to address, pending sales, and then the sales graph. Then we have the sales by item. So we can also think of sales by item. What did we sell? What services did we provide? What inventory items did we sell? Sales by item summary, sales by item detail. Then we have the sales by rep summary, sales by rep detail. Then we're going to go to the jobs, time, and mileage. Jobs, time, and mileage. We have the job profitability summary. We're not going to get into a lot of detail on these because these are going to be more specific to different types of industries. But we have the job profitability detail, the profit and loss by job, the item profitability, and the unbilled costs by job. Then we have estimates. If we were to estimate jobs, job estimate versus actual summary, job estimate versus actual detail, item estimates versus actuals estimated by job, and open purchase orders. Then we have the time by job summary, again tracking the time in each job, time by job detail, time by name, time by item. Then we have the mileage by vehicle summary, mileage by vehicle detail, mileage by job summary, mileage by job detail. Then we're going to go into the vendors. Vendors is going to be on the accounts payable side of things. Those are the people that we owe money to. These reports are mainly going to be supporting the accounts payable report on the financial statement. So note that every report, in essence, that's not basically the balance sheet or income statement, or you can think of the statement of cash flows, but mainly the balance sheet, income statement, or profit and loss, is really a supporting report to those financial statement reports. This one then is going to be supporting the accounts payable as or in a similar way as these reports supported the accounts receivable, in a similar way as these reports reported the sales item or revenue or income item on the income statement. So this is going to be the AP aging summary. That's going to be how old are going to be the items that we owe. These types of reports, by the way, are going to be things that could be full-time jobs in types of companies for individuals that work in accounts to payable. Then we have the AP aging detail. We have the accounts payable graph. Then we have the vendor balances. We have the vendor balance summary. Who do we owe money to? Give us a list of the vendors and the amount of money we owe to them. We have the vendor balance detail. We have the unpaid bills detail, the transaction list by vendor, and then 1099 reports. These are kind of reports that we would have to report at the end of the year. So a 1099 summary and 1099 detail. This is going to help us to figure out if we need to issue a 1099 to vendors. And then we have the sales tax liability, sales tax revenue summary. Sales tax is a specific vendor that we owe money to for tax that we will be collecting. We'll talk about sales tax as we go through our practice problem. Lists. We have the vendor phone lists. So obviously we're going to have a contact list of all the vendors that we have. We have the vendor contact list, which is in essence a more detailed list of the contact information. Then we're going to go to the purchases. Within purchases, we got the purchases by vendor summary. So we're going to have the vendors and the purchases laid out by the vendors, the people that we owe money to, the people we pay. And then we got the purchases by vendor detail, giving us the detail of those transactions. We have the purchases by item. So now we're breaking out the purchases not by who we bought them from, but by what we bought. Typically inventory type of items are what we concentrate in on here, purchase by item detail. Then we have the open purchase orders. We're going to purchase orders are going to be those things are requests for inventory. Open purchase orders would be ones that we requested and have not yet received inventory. Open purchase order detail, open purchase orders by job. Then we're going to go to the inventory. Obviously, inventory is then supporting all these reports, supporting the balance sheet account of inventory, an asset on the balance sheet. We have the inventory valuation summary, inventory valuation detail. What's the value of the inventory? Inventory stock status. We have inventory stock status by item. How much inventory do we have on hand by inventory item? Actual components or types of inventory. Inventory stock status by vendor. So that was the people that we purchased from. Physical inventory worksheet and the pending builds. Then we're going to go to the employee and payroll. The employee and payroll are going to support various accounts related to payroll, including the payroll expense account on the profit and loss report, payroll liabilities on the balance sheet. We have the payroll summary. We have the payroll item details. Going to break out the payroll by item, payroll items, not inventory items. And then we have the payroll detail review, the payroll transaction by payee. We have the payroll transaction detail, payroll liability balances, how much we owe on the liability side. Next, we have the payroll item listing, the employee earnings summary, employee state tax detail, employee pay adjustment history. There's a lot of payroll reports. I'm just going to read through these fairly quickly. State entitlement report. Obviously, we'll go into a lot more detail on this in the payroll type of section, and we have a course on payroll where you can consider more detail in terms of the payroll and payroll reports within it. Employee, we have the employee contact list, just to give us a list of the employee contacts similar to a customer contact and vendor contact. The employee withholdings, we have the paid time off list. Now we're going to go to the banking section. Within the banking section, of course, within the banking section, some of these reports will be supporting in part the checking account or cash accounts on the balance sheet. We have the deposit detail. So the deposits that we will make, the detail there, the check detail. So and that's going to be obviously the increases in essence and the decreases in the checking account, the deposits and the check detail. Then we have the missing checks, reconciliation discrepancies, and the previous reconciliation. Note that when we reconcile, we can't always go back as easily to prior reconciliations, but we can go to the one reconciliation previous. In other words, if you want to go to the one before that, it could cause more problems, and therefore you want to print the bank reconciliations when you do them, as we will discuss when we make the bank reconciliations. But just don't think of this report as kind of like an easy report that you could just generate all the time, no matter how old the bank reconciliation is, as you can with other type of reports. It's a little bit different. And then we're going to go to the account and taxes. These are going to be types of reports oftentimes that will deal with debits and credits. All the reports we've gone to thus far do not use debits and credits most of the time because they're trying to put the reports in format of a plus and minus type of format. These are going to be reports often used by the accountants, but often very important too, or very useful in some cases. So they include something like the trial balance, which will have debits and credits. When we go through the practice problem, however, we will go into the trial balance because even if we don't know debits and credits, it's a really useful report to get kind of a shorthand list of the accounts we have and the balances within them without all the subcategories. So it actually puts together the balance sheet and income statement. We'll spend more detail there. The general ledger. The general ledger will give us more detail of the transactions that are going to be happening. It'll give us a detailed report in a more kind of formal way that an accountant that has more formal accounting would recognize more easily, or use a lot more, to actually easier to read if you have the debits and credits, but it'll include the debits and credits within it. Then transaction detail by account. Then we have the journals. These are going to be types of journal entries that if we were to actually enter journal entries, types of transactions that don't have a form related to them, but where we use the journal entries. Then we have the audit trail. We have the voided deleted transaction summary. And we have the voided deleted transaction detail. This can be useful in those cases where you actually delete, transactions, because QuickBooks will allow you to delete transactions in a way that sometimes other accounting software wouldn't let you do, because you'd want more of an audit trail. So this can give you some kind of format of more of an audit trail if you have a deleted item or you're trying to figure out something that happened. Transaction list by date. This is a really useful report because it gives us kind of similar detail as the general ledger. However, rather than be reported by account, it's going to be reported by date. So if you just want to go through and see what the transactions happen over a certain period, you can run this report, and we will be looking at that report a lot when we start to enter our data into the financial statements? Well, we'll look at it at the end of each month or each time period that we will be working. Listing, we have the account listings. We can have a list of the accounts. We have the fixed asset listing. Then we have the income tax preparation, income tax summary, and income tax detail. Then we're going to go to the budgeting on the left. Within the budgeting items, we got the budget overview, the budget versus actual. We'll take a look at these when we actually create a budget in the practice problem. We got the profit and loss budget performance, the budget versus actual graph. Finally, we have the lists on the left, different types of lists, including the customer phone list, which I believe you can find in the customer area as well, but it might be faster and easier to find it in the lists here. We have the customer contact list, then the vendors. Again, you could probably find these. We saw these, I believe, in the vendor section, but it might be easier if you just want the list of vendors and the contact information to go to lists rather than vendors, because it'll be easier to find in here. Vendor phone list, the vendor contact list, and then the employees, the employee contact list, and then other names phone list, other names contact list. These are people that are not employees, vendors, or customers that we put into other. And then listing, we have the account listing, which again we saw in the accounting and taxes, but it might be easier to get the chart of accounts or the listing of accounts from here. Item price list, and then the item listing, the payroll item listing, the fixed asset listing, and the terms listing, the to-do notes, the memorized transaction listing.